Hey developers, today we are looking at JavaScript generators. We're going to look at what iterators are, and we're just going to kind of deep dive into what these terms are. We're going to do a few examples, and I want you guys to follow along, so make sure you watch all the way to the end and you can learn all about it. And as always, my name is Eric. I'm a full stack software developer. I'm also the author of a few books, and you can find everything in the link in the description below. So I have Visual Studio Code open right here, and I also have some MDN articles that we can refer to. So let's start from the beginning. So we want to learn a few things today. First, we're going to look at first we're going to look at iterators, and then we're going to take a look at generators, and we're going to see if we can create our own generator that iterates through objects. So that's kind of the goal that we want to do today. So we're going to look at all these different terms and see if we can do all that. So the first thing to do is let's see if we can understand what iterators are and how we iterate things. So if we go to our handy dandy MDN, you can see here there's something called a for of loop. And to really understand that, it loops over iterable objects. And those most common ones are strings. So we know it's strings, arrays. We know it's also arguments or array-like objects or node lists. Arguments, node lists. We also have a few other ones like typed arrays, map sets, and then typed arrays, maps, sets, and our user-defined iterables, which we can create one later. So this is kind of the basis of where we want to start. These are basically can be iterated because they're iterators. They're, as it says here, iterable objects. Let's have a quick word from our sponsor, and today it is Eduonix. That's eduonix.com. They are a course platform. They have a lot of courses and a lot of great deals. They have these monthly sales, like this month it's buy one, get one free. So make sure you check it out. I actually have a coupon code ERIK20, that's ERIK 20, that you can get additional 20% off. But I want to highlight real quickly one of their e-degrees. It's the Full Stack JavaScript Developer e-degree. So this has like 55 hours of content. It has over 2,000 students already. It's basically a complete resource to learn full stack JavaScript web development. It's a comprehensive program, includes over 12 courses, 30 projects, and hundreds of source code snippets. And as it says, the only resource you need to learn full stack web development. So I would highly recommend looking at this. I looked at the course curriculum. So it has everything from HTML, semantic HTML, advanced CSS, JavaScript, goes into frameworks, even goes into PWAs. So check this out. Make sure you use the code ERIK20. I'll have the link in the description. Make sure you click on that link and check out Eduonix. Thanks. Okay, so let's take a look at arrays first and see how that works. So we're going to create an array. I'm going to call it companies, and I'm putting in Microsoft, I don't know, Yahoo, and one more Apple. And if you really want to iterate through companies, there's a lot of ways to do that using ES6 and JavaScript, but one common way, like we just saw, is the for of loop. So we can do const company of companies. And now we have access to company. And you can see here's what it looks like. And by the way, I'm using a plugin in Visual Studio Code called Quokka, and it just outputs the information to the screen instead of having to look inside the console. So this is great and easier when I'm doing this tutorial for you guys. Now you're probably wondering, how were we able to do this const company of companies and it was able to iterate through? And if we looked at the documentation, it iterates over iteratable objects. So we can actually see that this is an iteratable object. So if we go to companies and we look up symbol.iterator, and symbol is like a way to look, it's like a key, like a unique key in JavaScript that you can have. An iterator is a method that returns the default iterator for an object. So we can do symbol.iterator. And by the way, symbol is part of the 8 types inside JavaScript, because we know there is, let's see here, there's Boolean, null, undefined, number, big int, string, symbol, and object are the 8 different types, and symbol is one of the types. So we can do symbol iterator, and this will actually return back the iterator. So if we go ahead and do this, iterator, you can see here it says iterator in brackets here, and this basically means that it's an iterator, and that's built into this company's array here. And if iterators actually have some special properties, they have something called next, which allows us to actually show you the next object. It actually iterates through it. So this is also the / question mark is also a Quoco thing to let us look at this method. So it returns this iterator object. And this iterator object has a value and has a done flag. So we can actually have this run a few times and take a look at what it does. So you can see here, the first time it runs, it returns Microsoft. Second time it runs, it returns Yahoo. Third time it runs, it returns Apple. And the fourth time it runs, it returns this object with done equals true and the value is undefined. So this is all sort of built in to the array object. It's also built into strings and all of these other iteratable objects in JavaScript. So that's what the iterator is. And we could also do the same thing with strings, like I said, but we won't get that far. So now that we understand how iterators work, we can see if we can add it to something that doesn't have, it's not iteratable off the bat. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at something else. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all this. Let's create a const person. And this const person is an object, and we'll have a name, Erik, and we'll have a phone, which we'll just put in a random 5551212. So now if you're thinking the same thing, well, is this iterable? We can take a look. We can do const iterator equals person symbol.iterator, and you can see here right away it says it's not a function, and iterator is not there. It's basically undefined because it's not a function. It gave us an error right here in the middle. So we can't iterate over person the same way we do with other iteratable objects. But let's say we wanted to make it so we can iterate over it. So let's do that. Let's do this the hard way. And you probably are thinking, if you're listening and watching closely at home, there's many ways you can iterate over an object and grab the keys of each one. However, we are going to do it this way first, and then I'll show you a few other ways. So you can do something like this. I'm going to add and make this a iterable object by defining the symbol.iterator on it. So we're going to do this with my arrow function, and we're going to create call 0, and that's going to return an object, and we're going to define the next, and that's going to have a stop criteria here, and that's object.keys, and we're going to put person.length. You're already thinking object.keys, that sounds familiar. Yeah, we'll talk about it in a second. We'll calls ++, and if stop, then return, so value person. We'll just do this first, actually. We'll do object.keys person, and then we'll grab the we'll grab this one in here. And then we also have to have a done, which is false. And if stop is not false, it's true, then it will fall back to this return here, and this is done will be true. So now we have added this iterator to the person object. It's a lot of code, but it works. Well, obviously there's easier ways of doing this. And you can see here this calls, it's basically a closure, and it'll get up every time this is ran, it'll iterate the calls. So it can tell how many times it's been run. So now if I look at person and look at symbol.iterator, you can see it actually has an X, so it's essentially a iterator. So we can do this. We can do const p equals, I don't know, dot 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 person. And if you look at it, now it's actually returning. So we use the spread operator in person. You can see it's actually returning name and phone, which is not an object. It's returning as an array with name and phone, which is perfect. So we should actually be able to use the for of loop too. So const p equals person equals const p equals, we'll do const p of now person. And if we look at p, it's returning name and phone. Now, what happens if we wanted it to return, I don't know, let's say the actual values instead of the keys? Then I could just change this value here to, let's see, we would go person, and then this would be the index of it. And now we get the actual values, Erik and 5551212. So we've essentially taken this person and made it iteratable. Now this isn't the easiest way of doing it. Obviously this is a lot of code. So this is where generators could come in and make our lives a little easier. So I'm just going to delete all this for now. And if you are interested in this code, make sure you take a screenshot here so you can try it yourself. And instead, what we're going to do is we're going to write this in as a generator. So we can do this a few ways. So we'll go person, and we'll do symbol.iterator again. And this time it's going to be equaling a function with a star at the end. And this represents, it's a function generator. When you have function a star, it's a generator. And then we can have anonymous function here, and it will actually yield. So we can yield object.keys this. And if you don't know, object.keys basically takes whatever object's inside there and returns back keys as in an array. So now, since we have this new object here, we can take a look at it. So if we go for const b of person, and we look at b, cool. So you see it returned the name and phone number as we expected. That's awesome. We could also, if we didn't want to yield object.keys, also one other thing to note, we can do const l equals, and we'll use the spread operator, a person. And you can see it actually returns an array of an array there, which is a little weird. It's like an array inside array. To fix that, the for loop, the for of loop, returns it fine. But actually to return that, we want to do yield star. There it goes. So now it's returning it the correct way. So it has the name and phone as we expect it to be. Cool. Actually, excuse me, when you don't have the star there, you can see here, it does return it as a weird array. So we would need the star there to return it the correct way. Cool. So that's how you would essentially create our own iterator here. And you see this is a lot less code. Using generators is a way easier way and a lot less code than what we did before. So what are generators? We kind of map that in with our iterables, but basically a generator is an object that's returned by a generator function and conforms to both the iteratable protocol and iterator protocol. And also it basically, every time it has a yield, it yields back and it pauses and it resumes every time you do next on it. So let's go back here and look just at a normal iterator. And we'll just comment all this out. So I can just create an iterator. Remember, put the star afterward, and I'll call it generate things. And inside here, I'll have a yield statement. I can yield whatever I want. Hello, world. Yield. Hi. Yield. Test. And then I'll return something if I want. Return. And now I want to create a variable and assign it to the generator. So I'll do generate things here. And remember how I did before with the iterators, with the array, and I was able to do next? I can do the same thing here. So I can do g.next. And you can see here, it returns this generator object, this value hello world done false. So now I have basically created an iterator for this generator here. And it's basically syntactic sugar for what we did before. So now we have next says hi done false, test, and then return. So it went through these 3 yields. And then finally the last one, it did the value return, and done is true. So it's done. And if you do it again, then you just get undefined, but done is true. So that's the way it works. You can also pass things into your generators. So let's say in this second one here, I const L equals here, and I'll console log L, which right now it's undefined. But let's say I put in a value here, hi. Let's see, it's the third one. Let's see here, 1 second. There it goes. Yep, here it is. So I passed in this L, and now this console log says L here, or love. So now this, I was able to pass in a value into this love here, and it's actually being yielded back into the generator, which is pretty cool. All right, so let's do one more thing. So this is how you do generators, and I think it's pretty nice. So you're probably thinking like, how would I use this in some of my apps? Well, what you'd want to do, and I could do this in a future video, is you probably want to look at how some of your asynchronous code, how you're talking to different synchronous code. You definitely could use generators to grab information. So you can see this only grabs 1 yield at a time. It doesn't actually, it pauses every time you run next, it pauses. And in fact, you can also, if you wanted to, you could check to see if this value here, I don't know, M. You can see this is actually an object, so you can always check to see if m.done is done, and you could kind of do things there too. But it basically does the yield and then stops the function from running, and then it waits and then it runs the next one. So let's say we want to create our own object.entries. So let's go back to the person example we had before. I'm going to delete all this. And this person object, we know, I said there's a few ways we can iterate through objects. So let's talk about a few of them. So the first one you guys have probably done before is you do a for of loop. So const p of, and then you do object.keys, and that returns all the keys inside the object. And then you can simply use p to get the keys, or you can do person and then p as the key, which would actually return the values of it. And so that's one common way people use to iterate over objects. The other way people do is you go for const p, and you use this in operator, and then you just give it the name of the object. And by the way, this person hasn't been iterated or hasn't been changed at all. And then you can see here it gives you back the name and phone. Now the only problem with doing it this way is it's sort of recommended that if you're iterating over your properties that you do this has own property check. There's even a Stack Overflow where it still recommends that. So you have to do if P has, in other words, object, I should say, person has own property of P, then you put P right here. So it's recommended that you do this check to do this has own property, because if you look at here, there, and according to this JavaScript, this Stack Overflow, that it determines that the whole property is defined in the object itself or in the prototype chain. So there might be some situations where if this object gets changed at all and you don't use this check right here, you might accidentally iterate over something in the property chain. So it's always recommended you use this has own property. So it's a little bit more of a pain, but a lot of people use this way, this for in loops. One other way is we do for const P of, and then you can do object.entries, which returns an array of key/values of the enumerable property. So instead of doing const.p, we do const.keyValue of object.entries. And now you have option for both object.entries of person. So now I do key, I get the name and phone. If I do value, I get the actual value of it. So that's really handy too, this object.entries. And both object.keys and object.entries, you don't have to worry about using this has own property. That's only if you're using the for in loops. So let's see, can we create our own object.entries using generators? So that's the question. So we can. So what you do is function star. We're going to call ours object, our object entries. Doesn't matter the name. And then whatever you want to pass in, obj. And we're going to do prop keys. And we can do object. Well, you know what I'm going to do? Yep, I'll do object.keys. I'll pass in the object there. And then I'll do a for of loop, let, or const, doesn't matter, const prop key of prop, I'll do keys right here, because this is plural, of prop keys, and that will yield, now we're using our generator, return a array here, prop key, and we'll do obj of prop key. So now we have our own our object entries. And just to make this a little easier, I'm just gonna call it OE. OE. Okay. So I'll test it out. So we'll do a for loop. We're gonna have both the key and value, just like we did before of. We'll do OE, we'll pass in person, and now we'll see key, here it is, value. All right, so here we are using our own generator called OE instead of using object.entries, and it's essentially doing the same thing using this function generator. And then we could do all sorts of things. We could have it, skip every other one. We could have it give just the first letter of each key, or we can give the values of certain keys. We could do a bunch of different things to manipulate this, but this is basically our own object.entries that we created ourselves using generators. So that's a lot of information. If you got confused at any point, make sure you pause the video, leave a comment below, let me know what you're confused on. Try this for yourself. I think as you get farther and farther into JavaScript, you'll figure that these actually do come in handy. I could definitely see using this when you're iterating over large data sets, or if you have a pretty complex like JSON object and you're going through it, this would be a nice way to yield just partial amounts of the data that you need. Let me know what you think above in the comments below. I really appreciate it. Thanks.